Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome along to Brands Hatch for the second weekend of racing in the GT Cup Championship. We've got the sprint race coming up for you very shortly, and usually this would be scheduled to be a 25-minute sprint race. However, we've had pressures on the timetable today. There was an off in the qualifying session this morning for the number 99 Radical RXC of Steve Burgess. Now, while Steve was okay, the car took a bit of a battering, I'm afraid. Steve is feeling slightly second-hand, but he did get out of the car and it worked and walked away from it, going to show that both the safety features in the car and the circuit furniture did its job. But as the car went off at Hawthorne Bend, it did cause significant damage, not just to the tyre wall and the belting in front of it, but the barriers as well. So there was a long delay whilst that was taking place. It meant that the lunch break was brought forward. We actually started our lunch here 10:30 this morning because they knew there was going to be a long delay. That both this race, the sprint race, and the pit stop race that will be taking place later on today, have been shortened, as have all of the support races as well, to enable us to get all of the racing in this afternoon prior to what is a hard and non-negotiable 6:30 curfew here at Brands Hatch. So the cars are lining up on the grid. We've got some starting drivers for you as well. They've only just arrived, so I'm still working my way through the starting drivers at the moment. So just bear with me whilst I make a few additional notes as to who is going to be in each one of the cars. We can see there is Ian Loggy, who is partnered up with Richard Neary for the 2024 championship season. Sam Neary is the man that's alongside, and good to see back with us for this weekend, absent from Donington Park, but the Porsche 935 clone of Richard Chamberlain is back. Always a crowd pleasing car, that car. Fantastic to see it out there. It is without question a highly tuned beast and can be a little bit troublesome. And it's also great to see we've got out the Brabham BT62 as well, which is the car that is in the hands of Paul Bailey for this race. But he does share the BT62 Brabham with David Brabham, who is driving this car. Not for the first time. Last time we drove it was 2019 here at Brands Hatch. And a bit of a special moment for them because, of course, it will be David Brabham, come the pit stop race later on today, in a Brabham, heading down the Brabham Straight, which is, of course, named after the late, great Jack Brabham, who passed away 10 years ago already. Staggering, isn't it? And that number one Brabham, I'm not to say too much about it, but it is running a fully synthetic race fuel, so it is something different. You can see there's a gap there on the third row of the grid, and that's where we should have had the Radical RXC of Steve Burgess, but as we said, that car was involved in a large incident earlier on, and therefore is unable to take the start of this sprint race. So we've got round 5 of the 2024 GT Cup Championship about to get underway. As the cars head off on their formation lap, we should be able to guide you through the grid and the way that they line up after the qualifying session that took place earlier on today. Separate qualifying segments for GTO and GT3 and GTC, and it is going to be Charlotte Gilbert that starts from pole position, and alongside her is Ian Loggy, who will start on board the number 6 car. Row 2 of the grid is Richard Chamberlain, and for company he's got the number 33 Porsche in the hands of Seamus Jennings, and all Porsche second row of the grid. Paul Bailey in the Brabham lines up there on row number 3, and then there's the gap where we should have had the Tim Gray Motorsport Radical, but that was the car that brought about the red flag in the qualifying session. Then it's Warren Gilbert, who's only doing the sprint races this weekend, lining up alongside Jay Shepherd, who had a brilliant weekend at the Lotus, Wheel of the Lotus at Donington Park. Row 5 of the grid, it is Miles Rudman, sitting alongside the first of the GTH cars from Forsetti Motorsport, which is going to be Matthew Higgins. And row 6 of the grid, Charles Dawson at the wheel of the Team Parker Racing Mercedes, lines up alongside Chris Murphy with his BMW. Row 7 of the grid, it is Jody Sloss in the second of the Forsetti Motorsport Aston Martins. He's got Ray Harris, who joins us for this weekend at the wheel of his Ginetta. Welcome along, Ray, on the 7th row of the grid. And row 8 of the grid, it is Chris Hart, who lines up alongside the McLaren of Michael Orant. Row 9 of the grid, it's Leona Theobald, who lines up on the inside of the 9th row of the grid, alongside number 96, which will be John Curry. And the tail end of the order is Doc Bush, who lines up alongside Rupert Williams, who is behind the wheel of the new for 2024 Jolt Racing entry, the McLaren 570S. And hopefully those are the correct starting drivers. Apologies if I've misnoted any, but they have literally only just arrived to us, and we've come straight into this one following a further support race for the GT Cup. So the final bits of weaving being done before we then get everybody in neat 2x2 order. The lights are out on the safety car, which suggests we are good to go green flag racing this next time through. So the safety car will peel its way in towards the pit lane. A slightly shorter 20 minutes are on the clock for this one. The Group GTC Lamborghini of Charlotte Gilbert starts there on pole position. Ian Loggy it is that lines up alongside at the wheel of the GT3 Mercedes, and then as the pace begins to build and they head over the start-finish line this time through, in fact it's Tom Rawlings who starts from pole position, not Charlotte Gilbert. I've just picked up on that based on the starting drivers. Up towards Paddock Hill Bend they'll go for the first time, and hopefully everybody will be safely through the first corner. So Tom Rawlings is the starting driver according to the information I've got in front of me for the number 2 Lamborghini. Everybody looking rather tight. Ray Harris tried to sneak around the outside of Charles Dawson's Mercedes there. Then Ray Harris will then have the inside line as they head down in towards Graham Hill Bend. And they've all safely made it through. And now Charles Dawson is coming under pressure from the number 69 car in the hands of Chris Hart, who's trying to sneak his way up the inside. They're still side by side as they head round through there. Jody Sloss is hot on the heels as well as the next of the cars. In fact, that's another driver I've misidentified. It is Rihanna O'Meara Hunt that is due to be driving that car. So some of the Pro Sporting drivers starting the sprint race. So along the straight and up towards Hawthorne Bend they will go. And then building the speed as they head along the Derek Minter Straight. Warren Gilbert trying to stick his elbows out here and keep Miles Rudman at bay at the wheel of the Porsche. Both of those cars running in Group GTC for the Cup specification car. The Lamborghini running to Super Trofeo spec. Miles Rudman's car running to Carrera Cup specification, as would have been a season or so ago with the earlier iteration of car. And they're both being shadowed by the number 9 car, which hopefully is in the hands of Matthew Higgins. It's not, it's Mikey Porter. Now they've been able to look at who the starting driver is for that one. So again, I did say that they'd all reached us rather late, the starting drivers. I'm still trying to work my way through the admin and slowly picking up on the changes for those than I was expecting. So Warren Gilbert, followed by Miles Rudman, Mikey Porter under pressure from Ray Harris. Then it's Chris Hart, I think next up it is. Yep, just to confirm, Chris did start that car. The 96 is started also by John Curry, who shares not with Phil Keane for this weekend. It's Marcus Clutton that was a late call-up. Phil Keane, I think, is out racing in Mugello this weekend for the second round of GT World Challenge Sprint. So the race leader starting to pull away. Tom Rawlings starting to gap the car behind in the hands of Ian Loggy. Good to see Tom back in the GT Cup Championship. We saw him out in a GTH specification McLaren a season or so ago. Something with a little bit more power at his disposal. The Top Cats Racing with Hex.com Lamborghini Huracan Super Trofeo. At the moment, he's pulling away from the former British GT champion, who is not really starting to make the amount of daylight increase between himself and the orange car of Richard Chamberlain, the Porsche 935. So it's Lamborghini that leads Mercedes, Porsche there in third position. Fourth place at the moment is going to be another Porsche. Fifth place is going to be the Brabham. Sixth place is going to be the Lotus. Seventh place will be Lamborghini, Porsche in 8th, Aston Martin in 9th, Ginetta in 10th, I think, at the moment. So up towards the braking area for the right-hander at Druids goes Ian Loggy. Now, I think the gap between Ian Loggy and the orange Porsche of Richard Chamberlain came down over the course of that lap. And the timing screen confirms it did by 0.6 of a second. So the gap isn't formed yet for second and third place, the squabble, but it is closing up, that's absolutely for sure. Now, Richard Chamberlain at the wheel of the 935 has still got, not that far behind him, Seamus Jennings as well at the wheel of the GCAT Racing Porsche. And then there's the glorious sound of the Brabham BT62 in the hands of Paul Bailey. So good to see the Brabham back out. We've seen a good chunk of it in the past in GT Cup, where it has claimed overall wins. But hopefully some of the mechanical issues that the car had are now long forgotten, and it's great to see not only the car back out but also David Brabham sharing the car over the course of the pit stop races with Paul Bailey this season. We saw them out at the wheel of a Lamborghini for the opening round because the Brabham wasn't quite ready, but the Group GTO spec car. It looks good, doesn't it? It sounds utterly fantastic. As I say, it is running a sustainable or a synthetic fuel for this weekend. So over the start-finish line goes Paul Bailey. The spit of flame out the back of the McLaren, the unburnt fuel igniting as it comes out of the exhaust, trying to close the amount of daylight between himself and the GCAT Racing Porsche. Seamus Jennings that lies ahead. And then next up is going to be the car in the hands of Jay Shepherd, the National Motorsport Academy Lotus, which had a really good run at Donington Park. Jay Shepherd. Now, one of the best of the fights we've still got is still between Warren Gilbert and the Porsche that lies behind in the hands of Miles Rudman. They are still fighting over 7th and 8th place overall. That's going to be for 2nd and 3rd in Group GTC. There is the National Motorsport Academy Lotus of Jay Shepherd. Say a driver who claimed, what was it, 3 class wins, 3 group wins I think it was at Donington Park, one of which was an overall win in the race on Sunday. So he'll be more than pleased with that. Now, Paul Bailey has got himself right up onto terms here with the GCAT Racing Porsche of Seamus Jennings. This will be for 4th and 5th position. Group GTO Brabham closing in on Group GT3 Porsche. So even if Paul Bailey gets by, it won't be any extra championship points heading in his direction because he's overtaking a car in a different group in reality. But it's not going to stop him wanting to try, because the Brabham will want to try and close in if he can, get past this Porsche and then concentrate his efforts on the orange one that lies ahead, which is Richard Chamberlain, who is a Group GTO car. And leading Group GTO at the moment is Ian Loggy at the wheel of the Team ABBA Racing green Mercedes. So through Graham Hill Bend, Ian Loggy in 2nd overall, Richard Chamberlain in the orange Porsche 3rd overall. Both of those cars run in the same group. Then it's the Group GT3 number 33 Porsche, followed by another Group GTO car in the hands of Paul Bailey. So good to see a good number of cars in Group GTO this year. Jay Shepherd at the wheel of the Lotus. That's another car that runs in Group GTO. He's lying 4th in that group at the moment, 6th overall in the race. Group GTH, just to pick up on what's going there, Mikey Poulter in the number 9 Aston Martin leads Group GTH at the moment. But there's a good battle going on for what I think will be 3rd and 4th in Group GTH. Yeah, Chris Hart and Charles Dawson together. This is going to be for 11th, 12th place overall, 3rd and 4th in Group GTH, which is for those cars that comply with GT4 homologation. And Rihanna O'Meara Hunt, the Kiwi, also trying to see whether she can close in on the pair of Mercs that lie ahead at the wheel of the 2nd of the 2 Aston Martins. So there goes the Forsetti Motorsport Aston Martin trying to catch the 2 Mercs ahead. Of course, it will be home territory next time out for Forsetti Motorsport. They're based at the entrance to Snetterton Circuit, and that's where we go to in 2 weeks' time for the next 4 races in the 2024 GT Cup Championship. So 12 minutes just over to go. Charles Dawson still hot on the heels of Chris Hart. A flash of the lights, the Team Parker Racing car. Just letting the car ahead know that he's absolutely there. But the Morpheus Racing Merc is not going to be put off by that one. A little wiggle just as Chris Hart got on the power again coming out of Paddock Hill Bend. But there's no opportunity for Charles Dawson to squeeze his way through and ahead of Chris Hart. So they'll head downhill in towards the braking area for Graham Hill Bend on what will be their 6th time of asking this time through. Now, last time through, Tom Rawlings set the fastest lap of the race that we've seen so far, 1 minute 27.870 from him, meaning that he now leads by 5.5 seconds from the next car behind. Now, is Rihanna O'Meara Hunt closing on this pair of Mercedes ahead? A quick look towards the timing screen suggests no, not on that lap. We've still also got this good fight going on for what will be 4th and 5th position. Paul Bailey still in the Pirelli wheel tracks of the GCAT Racing Porsche that lies ahead. The Brabham, has it got an extra bit of grunt in a straight line? It has, but the Brabham straight isn't quite long enough for the Brabham of Paul Bailey to squeeze its way through. So has little choice but to sit back behind the Porsche and see whether there's somewhere else he can unlock the door to gain the place. But the GT3 Porsche still ahead of the GTO Brabham at this stage. So they head back along the Cooper Straight. All of the time, Jay Shepherd sitting in the background, looking as though if he would close in, but he's lapping at a similar pace to them. So the all-black Lotus Evora, the National Motorsports Academy car, not really closing in. We've still got this good fight also going on for second and third place, haven't we? Ian Loggy in the Group GTO leading Mercedes, lies second overall in the race, but it leads the group, is under pressure from Richard Chamberlain, who did not appear at Donington Park. He appeared on the media day and did a load of laps. All things seemed to go well in testing for him yesterday, and hopefully some of the mechanical gremlins in what is a fairly highly strung car of Richard Chamberlain have been put to the background, because he's having a good run here, Richard Chamberlain. So it's Group GTC car that leads, Group GTO car second and third. The leading Group GT3 car is the number 33 car here in the hands of Seamus Jennings, who this time might have to give second best to Paul Bailey, who draws the Brabham BT62 alongside, but again, can't quite close the deal there, Paul Bailey. So he still sits behind the Group GT3 leading Porsche. He's going to have another nibble as they head up towards the braking area for Druids. But nothing doing again. Seamus Jennings still able to cling on to the lead of Group GT3 and fourth overall. Even if the Brabham went by, he'd still be leading Group GT3 at this stage. Now the speeds begin to build again as they head towards Pilgrim's Drop, with now 8 3/4 minutes remaining on the clock. In a straight line, has the Brabham got the grunt? No, but Charles Dawson has been able to sneak his way through and finally get past and ahead of Chris Hart. So that will now put the number 31 Team Parker Racing Mercedes up into third overall in Group GTH. And it will also mean that it moves that car up to 11th overall in the race. Chris Hart down to 12th. And if he looks in his mirrors, he'll see that Rihanna O'Meara Hunt is beginning to close in at the wheel of the second of the two Forseti Motorsport Aston Martin GT4s. So 8 minutes to go. Round through Hawthorne Bend. This is where we saw Steve Burgess have his unfortunate off in qualifying. So Steve feeling slightly second hand, but the car and the circuit furniture stood up to what was inflicted on it. So hopefully we'll see Steve fit and well and back out in a couple of weeks' time at Snetterton. Bouncing over the curbs as they went through Sheen Curve, through then Stirlings. This is all new tarmac through this section, so the approach towards Sheen Curve and Stirlings, and then the tarmac ends as they head off the Grand Prix circuit back onto the Indy. You'll see it any second now that there'll be a change in the tarmac surface there, and that's where they come back onto the old tarmac compared to the new stuff that was laid just earlier on this week. Now Chris Hart flashing his lights this time. He's not close enough though as they head up towards Paddock Hill Bend. And as they head round through Paddock Hill Bend, I think there was one car that was just rejoining, having been down the pit lane, and I think that was the Lotus. Yes, it was. Yeah, I could see in the background of the shot that the Lotus is there, which is Jay Shepherd. So he's been into the pit lane for something and has now dropped from 6th position down into 12th place. And in fact, 13th at the moment, because he's behind Rihanna O'Meara Hunt. So should be able to squeeze away and past Rihanna O'Meara Hunt as they head along the Cooper Straight. Yep, the extra power of the Group GTO Lotus telling over the Group GTH Aston Martin, but I'm not quite sure what brought Jay Shepherd in towards the pit lane. It was only a brief call in towards the pits. Can't imagine it was a drive-through penalty, but something brought that Lotus in towards the pit lane, and that has dropped him well and truly down through the order. He's still running 4th in Group GTO, so whatever brought him to the pit lane, he did not lose a place in his group. But now we've got traffic to deal with for the front runners. Ian Loggy and Richard Chamberlain both sneaking through and past Rupert Williams, who's new to the championship for 2024, as are Jolt Racing, the team that he runs with. Partnered up with the very experienced John Ingram for the pit stop races at least. But the McLaren 570S is still something very different for Rupert. We might hear a little bit more about that over the course of this weekend, because he's not an absolute novice, but what he's driven in the past is very, very different to a McLaren GT4. Up towards Hawthorne once more comes the squabble over 4th and 5th position. Seamus Jennings in the 911 GTR GT3 still managing to hang on to the place along the Derek Minter Straight. Brake lights flash on, and That orange glow out of the exhaust pipes of the Brabham BT62 once more of Paul Bailey, but the Group GTO car cannot squeeze its way through and ahead. Now they've got the traffic to deal with. I think they'll meet Rupert Williams on the exit of Stirling's Bend. So Rupert, I'm sure, will stay out of the way. Let the two quicker cars go through. The marshals, as ever, doing a sterling job and waving the blue flags to forewarn the slower traffic that faster cars are approaching. Seamus Jennings picks his way through. Paul Bailey picks his way through. They roll their sleeves up. They continue in the battle once more. So 5 minutes remaining as the fight for 4th and 5th heads over the start-finish line. Tom Rawlings, the overall race leader, now leads by a very comfortable-looking 10 seconds. As Tom Rawlings. Ian Logie still there in 2nd place, but is still only 0.2 of a second up the road from Richard Chamberlain. So the fight for the overall lead of Group GTO, which is 2nd and 3rd overall, hasn't separated up much at all, and neither is this squabble either for 4th and 5th place. Seamus Jennings squabbling away with Paul Bailey. But there through shot, you could just see how close the green Mercedes was to the orange Porsche. There goes the next of the squabbles, which is 4th and 5th place up towards Hawthorne Bend. So you really don't get an impression as to how banked Hawthorne is, where the car really hooks in towards the apex. And this is the fight still for 2nd and 3rd overall, but more importantly, the lead battle in Group GTO. Still being headed by Ian Logie for the Team Abbott, who he's racing with in GT Cup. Of course, he races for a different team in British GT, where he'll be competing against that very car next weekend. Now, Tom Rawlings has not put a wheel wrong in this race. He really has driven superbly well, Tom Rawlings. So the number 2 Top Cats Racing with Hex.com Lamborghini leading by 9.8 seconds from this number 6 Mercedes in the hands of Ian Logie, who is still under pressure from Richard Chamberlain. They've got Doc Bush's Team Parker Racing Porsche in the hands of the former motorcycle racer to work their way past. Doc, as ever, well aware of what's going on around him, stays out of harm's way, lets the quicker cars go through. 3 minutes just over remaining, and 2 very different cars. One car which is the latest Evo spec of GT3 car, and the orange Porsche that sits behind, which is absolutely a match for it around this circuit. Harks back to what, the 1970s, but has been hugely developed by Richard Chamberlain and the very, very small team around him over the years. Might be a bit like Trigger's Broom, that there's not a lot of the original 911 left in this 935 clone now, but it's always so good to see it out, and Richard is as quick as he's ever been still, and just going to show how well suited he and the car are as a pairing, because he is right on the coattails of a modern spec GT3 Mercedes that's in the hands of a former British GT champion, Ian Logie. So over the start-finish line they'll go. A couple of minutes remaining on the clock, which means there should be this lap and one more thereafter. We'll try and keep an eye out, because the checkered flag may well come out a little bit early because of the time pressures we're under to squeeze everything in this afternoon, following the delays in the timetable earlier on today. But either way, it's been a good old race between Ian Logie and Richard Chamberlain, and the same really for Seamus Jennings and Paul Bailey in their Porsche and Brabham respectively. They've had a good little fight. So along the Cooper Straight, up towards the left-hander at Surtees. More traffic to deal with as well. That will be the Ginetta in the hands of Leona Theobald, I think they're coming up against next. Seamus Jennings and Paul Brabham still squabbling over who wants to be in 4th and who wants to be in 5th position. But it is still Porsche ahead of Brabham BT62. A very different soundtrack that the 6-cylinder Porsche gives out compared to the V8 engine Brabham. But again, weaving round one way and the other. Paul Bailey, who of course is the reigning overall champion in GT Cup, back for another season this year. Different teammate though, different car now to he largely campaigned in 2023. But still cannot squeeze his way through and past the man from Northern Ireland, Seamus Jennings, at the wheel of the GCAT racing car, which had a really good weekend also at Donington Park. We saw Seamus Jennings and Greg Caton, who he shares the car with, claim 2 overall wins at Donington Park. They won their group GT3 on each occasion, such is the entry that we have in the GT3 category this year. Now, has Paul Bailey got the opportunity here? Now again he has another good look, but again doesn't want to try anything to put himself or the car in danger for what is a very rare car, Paul Bailey's. And they've also got that Ginetta of Leona Theobald just up the road that could come into play and have an effect on the race. Now the clock has ticked to 0, so Tom Rawlings will now be on to his last lap of the race and will be working his way through towards the end of the second sector, I would have thought. Yeah, here he comes now up towards Sheen Curve. So we'll head through the second sector of the race, which is, or second sector of the lap, which is just before the approach towards Stirlings, through the left-hander. And maybe a little bit more traffic to deal with, but I don't think he's going to catch that until after the start-finish line, which is going to be Michael Arant's Paddock Motorsport McLaren Artura. But for Tom Rawlings and for Top Cats Racing, it's going to be an overall win in round 5 of the 2024 GT Cup Championship. Over the start-finish line comes the Lamborghini Super Trofeo, claims the win in round 5 of the 2024 Championship season. Wait for the arrival of Ian Loggy, who any second now at the wheel of the green Mercedes heads over the start-finish line to finish in second position and claim top honours in Group GTO, with Richard Chamberlain coming through, the matter of a couple of seconds later to finish in third place overall. And Paul Bailey on the run to the line was right alongside Seamus Jennings. Did he get the Brabham's nose ahead? Well, the timing screen at the moment is saying that Seamus Jennings in the Porsche by 23 thousandths of a second beat Paul Bailey's Brabham. But usually what happens when they are that close to the start-finish line, they usually, TSL, our timekeepers, look back at the timing and, if needs be, look back at the photo evidence of the cars coming over the start-finish line, and sometimes that order gets reversed. The Brabham certainly had the momentum coming over the start-finish line, but did it get there before the start-finish line? I'm not entirely sure. We'll confirm all of that when we go through the results shortly. And just to confirm that 6th overall went the way of the second of the 2 Top Cats Racing Lamborghinis in the hands of Warren Gilbert. Miles Rudman was 7th. Mikey Porter was there in 8th, so that will be the win in Group GTH. And then we should await the arrival of the next couple of cars over the start-finish line to complete the top 10. Ray Harris goes through now in the Ginetta, finishing 9th place, and Charles Dawson will complete the top 10. And someone dived for the pit lane there on the final lap of the race, which I think may well have been the second of the 2 Morpheus Racing cars, which, yeah, is in the pit lane together with Chris Murphy's BMW by the look of things. It's also destined for the pit lane at the end of that lap. I think they've been scooted round rather than do a full slowdown lap. Yeah, you can see they're scooted round the Indy circuit in reality and through the back entrance to the pit lane, so that's why they've got there so quickly. So we'll confirm the results for you very shortly. We've got the pit stop race coming up for you later on, but let's confirm the results then of round 5 of the 2024 GT Cup Championship. Tom Rawlings claims the win by nearly 11.5 seconds in the end from Ian Loggy in second position, but Ian Loggy picks up the win in Group GTO. Third was Richard Chamberlain, and 4th place, that's the Group GT3 winner, number 33, Seamus Jennings. Paul Bailey was there in 5th place, but look at the gap between 4th and 5th, just 23 thousandths of a second. Warren Gilbert was 6th. Miles Rudman was there in 7th place. In 8th place, it's the Group GTH winning car of Mikey Porter, with Ray Harris in 9th place, and Charles Dawson completed the top 10. Then as we move outside of the top 10, Chris Hart was there in 11th place with Rihanna O'Meara Hunt in 12th place. Michael Arant was 13th with John Curry 14th. Chris Murphy 15th. Leona Theobald was 16th. Doc Bush was 17th. And the winning Group GTA went the way of the car that was in 18th position, which was the McLaren of Rupert Williams. Jay Shepherd had problems and finished 2 laps adrift in the end. Did come into the pit lane at the wheel of his Lotus Evora, and he'll be classified as 19th position. And those are the results from round 5 of the 2024 GT Cup Championship here at Brands Hatch. We do have another race that's coming up for you later on. That will be the pit stop race, which again is going to be slightly shorter. Rather than be 50 minutes, it will be 40 minutes. But we'll be back with you for that later on this afternoon. Goodbye.